It's Matt from The Random Maker with, I think we're going to call this Back to the Basics. And this particular video is going to be about how to cross-cut on a table saw. The reason, to be fair, after me making a short about cross-cutting, fair point. So I am going to show you all how to cross-cut. This will show you the basic functions and safety required to do cross-cutting. So with that being said, let's flip clips. Whoop. Now that we are ready, let's start going through a couple basic terms and, to be fair, what you're going to need to cross-cut on a table saw. Let's go with terms first. So I keep saying the word cross-cutting. I've heard people teach it incorrectly. It's actually about the grain of the wood. If I am ripping this piece of wood right here and I cut like this, the grain is going in this direction. Ripping is cutting this way. Because the way lumber is normally processed, you'd use a fence, rip it through, everything's good to go. That is most of the time how a table saw is used. Now, when I'm referring to cross-cutting, what that means is I am cutting against or crossing the grain. So we have to do a special setup. Most table saws come with the stuff in the box. I'm using all of the manufactured stuff. You can use tables, you can use slides, you can use... Those are expensive or you have to build it. Let's go through what we are going to use. Some people would argue optional. I personally think they are wrong. Is these two items right here. This is a anti-kickback fingers. These are fingers attached to a metal piece that comes out of my table saw that when the wood is passed through, it can't kick back. It's like a lock, so once it passes, it can't go that way. The other thing I'm going to put on before we start cutting, it's a lot easier to see with it off, is just my blade guard. This is primarily to keep fingers from, if the wood kicks in any way, fingers from getting in the blade. Some people will argue that it is dangerous with cross-cutting. I argue against it because if you have a proper setup, it is perfectly safe and also I would say required. The next thing is, that's just the regular table saw stuff. Let's go into what we're going to use specifically for cross-cutting, okay? So I'm going to show two methods of cross-cutting today. The most common method, all you need is your handy dandy miter gauge. This is normally packed in with every single table saw. We'll show you how that works. The other type of cross-cutting, which is, I would say, the more dangerous when not set up, we are going to be using the table saw fence, a block of wood, and a C-clamp. Thing I'm going to mention, and it seems to be more common now, but my table saw blades are actually specific to cross-cutting and ripping. I'm using a combination blade, so it does both. Now, the trade-off for that is not as clean of a cut. Now, when I'm saying not clean of a cut, we're talking fine woodworking to a little more sanding, and especially if you're gonna use a router on the edges, you're not gonna notice it. Now, I am saying this is a dual use, so I always just keep dual use. The only time I really switch the blade is when I am doing something really fine, and I do have cabinetry blades for those fine cuts. And I just wanted to mention that because, yes, that will probably be asked if not. Okay, now that we've gone over what we need, let's actually set up and do some ripping. All right, let's switch scenes. Now we are ready to start actually cross-cutting. Now, one thing I want to notice, there is nothing else on this table. That is very on purpose because when we were cross-cutting, traditionally, the piece of wood is going to be wider against the blade. So if at any point it's hitting other stuff, it is not going to take a lot of force to get it to move, which can cause it to bind, and that's when cross-cutting is so dangerous. That's why a lot of professional shops and schools, universities, they always have a table slide jig. So it's basically almost another tabletop that goes in, slides on there. So there can't be other stuff on there. It's one of the reasons they do it. Also, to be fair, it has more backing, so you'll get a cleaner cut, more accurate. I don't have one of those. I don't do enough cross-cutting, but I just wanted to mention that's why it's taught a lot of the ways with that. There is good reason. In my case, don't have one. I'm not going to build one and I'm not going to spend the money. So for the amount of cross-cutting I do, I just use this. And this is perfectly safe as long as there is no obstruction. So there is nothing on the table. So when I push through, it's not going to hit anything, causing it to teeter, which means it'll be safe as long as I'm always able to push through. And that's a big thing when you're getting ready to cross-cut. As you can see here, I've got my anti-kickback fingers there. I've got my blade guard on. I'm gonna set the table saw blade height 1/8 of an inch above the height of the wood, so that I'm exposing the least amount of blade as possible. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to push, without the wood actually touching the blade or anything, all the way through. The reason is I want to make sure the channel is clear, so I'm not going to stop mid-cut because that is dangerous. And I just want to make sure that everything is working safe according to how I have this set up, because that's the big thing with cross-cutting. All you have to do is make sure you have a clear push through. There's no big secret on that. Very simple. You would mark your wood where you want, push it through both hands on the miter gauge. Now, the reason for that is I want to make sure that my hand is in a safe position. I have a higher grip. My hands are going to be outside the red zone on the table saw, and it's just a very good practice. You want to be able to move your hands all the way through. I am also going to just push all the way through. Now, one big thing is normally with a table saw, you want to stand away from the material to kick back. Unfortunately, when it comes to miter gauges, because of how much more force it is, I want it to be dead stable. So I'm going to just stand right here, and I'm going to plant my feet and just push through. And then when I go past the blade, I'm going to take the wood back and then pull it back. I am not going to try and collect on the other side or anything like that, because you could push, let the wood drop. That's also a safe option. Cross-cutting, I am going to mention, because as you can see right here, I'm just doing cuts. This is also no different if you're doing an angle. The thing about miter gauges is you can set the angle, and I've shown it on a couple videos here and there where I've cut it right angle on here. All you have to do is set your angle, lock it, and you always want to make sure though your wood is facing back towards you. You never want it pushing forward, because that has a high chance of kicking up. And so you always want the weight of the wood on the above the cut. I don't know the right way to explain it. Just take a look on there. When it's like this, you can't have two hands on here because it'll be too close to the blade. What I'll tend to do is actually overlap my hand and just same thing there. I'm gonna film the next scene, cutting. So that's about it. Wait! Before you move on, well, actually, before I move on to the cut, how about this? If you like the video, do us a favor, hit the like button. If you want to give us any other ideas for a back to the basics video, put it in the comments below. And if you want to see more content from the Random Maker, do us a favor, hit the subscribe button. We're a tiny channel. It really helps us out. And, how about this? Let's get back to the video. Hang on. So one thing I failed to mention while I was filming kind of the talking part before the noise kicked up is we will leave little pieces of wood that, especially if they're light enough, they could fly backwards. You have two options. Number one, and the option I normally take, which is I just, to be honest, leave it. I have guards, I'm on this side, and normally if they're heavy enough that I'm gonna worry about, and to be fair, most of the time because of the weight of it, it doesn't let it going. Or you can get a push stick and clean it as you go. Those are two perfectly safe options. Push stick would be the more safe approach. So we're done with that. Let's talk about, you need to cut a ton of pieces. But I've said, you don't want anything on the table it can touch. So there's nothing I can use to touch it. And so that's why the fence was removed. Now, to cut a bunch of pieces, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab the fence and actually put it back on. Well, that's dangerous. Now this, if I put the wood up here and put the miter gauge up here, this is called double fencing. Never, ever, ever do this. This is incredibly dangerous. The wood, I shouldn't say a guarantee, but it will bind. There is no movement. If your hand slide, like the wind blows the wrong way, bad things will happen. Don't do this ever, please. But we need something to push up against to give us so that I can cut multiples at the same time. We need to create a gap. So this is why I have a 2x4 and a C-clamp. Now you can get a lot fancier with it. It's not perfect, but what you want to do is number one, you want the piece of 2x4 to end before the blade. So I've got roughly 4 inches if we measured it from there before the blade ends. The other part, and this is a thing I've learned, a lot of people tend to clamp at top. The bottom tends to run up, and then when you push it, it's not the same every time. This is one of the reasons I like C-clamps, is and especially with 2x4s, I can put the C-clamp far enough back on my fence, and I still have access to like move it and lock it. And I can still, it works really well for me. Every table saw is gonna be a little different, so you wanna be a little careful with this particular setup. So the other thing is, I think we can already see, you don't really wanna have a lot of length on this. So when I'm doing a lot of cuts with a miter saw setup and cross-cutting setup like this, what I do is I move my miter gauge to the other side of the blade. And this is where you can cut. Now that we got the block set up, and I'm gonna move over. This is where if you need to cut a bunch of blocks at a smaller distance. Now, the only problem is you have to measure from the block to the blade, not to the fence. So what I typically do is I'll measure onto the wood and then just keep one hand until it lines up on the blade. I look over here, and if there's a pencil mark on this piece of wood, and because again, I have 3.5 inches of before the wood will get bit by the blade compared to the fence, and you need that gap, and I'll explain why in a second. And as soon as I'm happy there, I'm gonna lock it down. You also are going to want to clear the wood a lot more than if you were on the free, because there is a chance if you're cutting for them to twist and get caught and cause the shoot problem. So always have a push stick nearby to clear the wood as you go. Okay, now the whole reason we want this is needs to be a gap. And the reason for that is when we were doing the original cross cutting, I said you don't want it to touch anything because then it can twist and and then boom, kick back. So by creating that gap, you're artificially doing the same thing. Okay, I am putting obstruction here because I want to cut the same piece over and over and over again. So I can just boom, push the wood over, boom, oh, 2, 3 pieces, clear, push stick, not your hand. But what this does is it creates a gap. So 1.5 inches is my minimum personally. Some people would argue need more. I found if it goes too big, the pieces of wood can twist. As long as it's 1.5, it seems that even if the wood gets pushed up, there's enough room. It also avoids the anti-kickback fingers, which is one of their criticisms, is the wood can't escape there. I'm also clearing with the table saw. So for me, this is a very safe method. Some people would argue with the anti-kickback fingers. I've seen some bad kickbacks, so I like anti-kickback fingers. Luckily, it's never happened to me, knock on wood, but I think you get the point. If I had a large piece, I could just rip through very quickly. You know, this is both hands, and then I would pause, clean, both hands, pause, clean, and you can just constantly keep cutting hundreds, if not thousands of pieces. Back when I was working more in carpentry, I had to cut hundreds of a block or something one day. I literally just put boxes on the other side of the table saw, so when I cleared it, then I just came, brought it over. Anyway, the whole point of this setup is I'm creating gaps while still allowing myself to have a repetitive cut motion on and on. So instead of me talking, let me show, and then let's wrap up this back to the basics video. Boom. Always stand by your machine, make sure it's off. Well, there we go. That is how you are going to cross-cut 2 ways, very simply. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more Back to the Basics videos, put them in the comments below, like I said below. And how do I like to end every video? Oh, really easy. This is Matt from The Random Maker, and until next time, let's get making.